everybody, and welcome to another show of Jumpstart Monday. Today, we have a very interesting topic, managing the newly promoted manager or the newly promoted team lead. You know, as I once read, according to the Peter Principle, people are promoted to the level of their incompetency most of the times. So they're good at what they do, they get a promotion, and then they find it very difficult to cope. For example, you have a great salesperson, they're doing amazingly out in the field, and you get them in as a manager of managers, and then he or she finds it very difficult. So for today's episode, we have a man that I truly admire. He was my first ever mentor back in Ireland at the IMI, Irish Management Institute, where 20 lecturers from Cyprus were selected. I was fortunate enough to be selected at the time that I was very, very young. That was 20 years ago. And Paul Donovan has helped me to have a career, to travel in different countries, to understand leadership, management, and above all, how to structure a workshop. Paul is an expert, as I said, in managerial learning, and he's an adjunct associate professor for Trinity Business School. There are many other things I can say about Paul, but he's so modest. Watching his recent live show, he said, forget all the degrees, forget everything. At the end of the day, what we say is who we are. So without any further ado, let me bring him on. Paul, welcome to the Jumpstart Monday show.
Thank you so much, Michael. It's great to be here. Lovely to see your session going so well every week. It's great. Very exciting.
Thank you very much, Paul. It's an honor to have you. We haven't spoken for many years, and we haven't seen each other in the flesh for more than 20 years now. So thank you very much for coming on to our show. Guys, please do send your comments in. Ask your questions, because at the second part of the show, if there are questions, then we'll be more than happy to answer them together with Paul. So, Paul, we have a few questions that we selected after we watched your show. It's very important for the new team lead to be successful in their new position. So my first question is the following. What is the biggest challenge facing the newly appointed team leader? And if you would like to mention more than one challenge, please be my guest.
Great question. And it brings me back to when I was a young engineer and I was working with a team of civil engineers, and I thought I was doing quite well. And then suddenly the management came along and said, we want to make you into the team leader. So I remember it very clearly how almost afraid I was, because I was wondering, these are my friends. What am I going to do? You're going to make me their boss. And so this was a real challenge for me. And I went home and I felt, I didn't feel confident. And so looking back on that, the things that worked well for me was that my mentor helped me to understand the difference between my operating work, my engineering work, and my managing work. So one of the first things we must do is to define for the team leader or the newly appointed manager, what is managing? And we go back to Mary Parker Follett of 100 years ago, who said managing is getting results through other people, not by yourself, through other people. So what was great about that mentor helped me to define management, but also to understand the difference between my engineering work, my operating work, and my managing work. There were two different things. So when I was doing my engineering work, I was getting my results through my own hands. When I was doing my managing work, I was getting it done through the work of others. So that gave me lots of confidence. So that's how I grow team leaders, new team leaders. I make them see the difference so they can understand what the job is. Very important. Yeah.
I love your reply. If I understood well, other than the fear that comes up, if you clear the roles and explain which are the roles, because when you work in a team, maybe or probably you're managing yourself, and then you have to manage others in the process as well. So that was an amazing example you have given us to understand. So if we dig in a bit deeper and go in a bit deeper, so kind of understanding what other methods can be used to further develop these team leaders. First and foremost, okay, you said we have to explain the roles, we have to explain what managing is, getting results through other people. but what other substantial methods can be used other than explaining the difference?
Clarity. Clarity is the most important. And what I mean by clarity is clarity about what is expected of them. And I give one question to all my students. I give one question, especially to newly appointed team leaders. The question is, you must ask this question of your manager, is what will you accept as evidence that I have been successful in 6 months in this job? What will you accept as evidence that I have been successful? Now, that's a great question, because if you ask it of your manager has to come up with the indicators, clear indicators as to how you're going to achieve success in the job. Now, if you have that, you can measure how you don't need a manager on your shoulder every day. You can measure how you're doing. You have targets to work towards. So the real issue therefore is the clarity. And the other thing I would say is, in a good relationship, Michael, in a good relationship, before you tie the knot, you have to keep your eyes wide open. But after you tie the knot, you have to keep them half shut. And it's the same. Before you pick your team leader, have your eyes wide open as to who you're picking. And after you pick them, keep them half shut. Don't be sitting on their shoulder. Don't be sitting on their shoulder. Give them the chance to make mistakes and be there to support them.
Amazing answer. Max, who's my assistant, if you're listening in, when you come to Limassol on Thursday, you have to ask me about what will I accept as evidence that you have done quite well in the first 6 months. I love this, loved it. And the eyes have shut, not wide open. Give some trust out to the other people and let them work their magic. Amazing, amazing. So next question. Sometimes the new team lead might fall behind. And if they fall behind, my question is the following. How can they deal with any underperformance that they may experience? How can the team lead's manager deal with any underperformance? As the eyes are half shut, what should he or she do? The manager of the team lead.
Okay, so if it's an emergency, you have to step in and you have to actually physically support them. You have to be there. You have to maybe even do it with them, do the job with them, etc., etc. But that's undesirable. It's undesirable. The most important thing you can do for anybody anybody you're working with, is to hold up a mirror and to let them see how things are going. In the hallway before you go out the door, everybody has a mirror to see how they look before they walk out into the street. So the other thing is, everybody needs that in life. You need the reflection. You need somebody to tell you how it's going. Now, one of the best ways of letting a manager know how they're doing is to say, well, okay, here are the figures for last week. Here is the progress, the success, etc. How do you think it's going? And reflect back and summarize what the person, so the person can actually see how they're doing through their own mouth, through their own eyes. And then you generally can improve them by saying, well, what are your options? What do you think you can do to improve? And which of those would be the best options for you to take? And when will you start those options? And what support do you need from me? So basically, if you give them scaffolding, to build a building. You don't have to build it for them, but you give them not holetres, but you give them the ladders that they can actually climb up, not so much the doing it for them, So the mirror is the first thing. Mirror goes up to say, how do you think things are going? Here's the progress so far. What do you think is happening? So what do you do? So you can reflect back what they're saying, and then help them to dig out the options and commit to taking one of those options.
Amazing. Tell them what to do, don't tell them how to do it, and they will surprise you with their ingenuity.
Yes,
and also
yes.
Hold up a mirror. Excellent. Let's see who's here and say good morning. Good morning, Antonio Spodolias. How are you doing, my friend? Productive October. Hello, Stephanie. Good morning. We'll get back to the rest in a while. Let's go to the next one. The next one is something that most people find it a bit difficult. I find it a bit difficult as well, because we are a bit selfish. Is delegation a skill that the newly lead will find difficult or not? Because we think that no one can do the job as we can do it.
Sure.
So, Paul, I love your examples and your vivid examples. So please tell us a story or tell us about the examples, please, anything.
Okay, I'll tell you about a story how I got everybody to delegate. So lots of people were not delegating. Lots of my frontline team leaders were not delegating. So there's always somebody that you can tell that they tell everybody. That there's somebody, if you could look at here, I am going to tell you this secret, and don't tell anybody. And the first thing that will happen is they tell everybody. So I found the person that is, as they say, they couldn't hold their pee-pee, that kind of thing.
Yes.
So I said to this guy, listen, the secret here is if anybody wants to do well at interviews for senior positions in my organization, they must be able to show a ready-made successor. That's the first question I'll ask them at the interview. Tell me who is your ready-made successor, and tell me how you have gone about growing them and developing them for the future when you leave. So this guy goes around and he tells everybody this. And of course, the first thing that happens is they know that when they go for an interview for senior positions, the first question they're going to be asked is, who is your successor and how have you developed him or her? And you can produce a lot of delegation by this. The message went out. There is no point in applying for senior positions if you have not got a ready-made successor. I don't care if you are Ronaldo. I don't care. Because why would I make you a big chief if you have only children working for you? You've turned them into children. I gave you wonderful workers and you turned them into children. So instead of telling people to delegate, I make it rational for them to delegate. That's what you have to do. You've got to make it rational for them. Telling them to delegate, they know this. They know they should delegate, but maybe they're scared. Maybe they're afraid. Maybe they think they do it best. Maybe they think they're the best in the world. All of these things. But the only way to do it is to make it rational for them.
Excellent. I love your examples. Love them. Guys, feel free to send in your questions if you have any questions. If you don't, it's okay. We will finish earlier, but feel free. And I'm going to be asking now my last question to Paul. Paul,
Right.
We all heard about the imposter syndrome, and people feel that they cannot do it. They won't be able to do it. They might fail while doing it. How can these newly promoted team leaders deal with this issue if this issue comes up?
I think it comes up with everybody. And I'm not sure it's a bad thing in some ways. I'm not sure it's a terrible thing to have an imposter syndrome, as long as we put it into good use. So it's a bit like nerves, being nervous before. Michael, you go to do lots of presentations. I'm sure sometimes you've experienced a little bit of nerves before you go.
Of course, not sometimes. All of the times. If I don't experience it, Paul, I feel something is going wrong. But
Bravo.
You have to learn how to handle it.
Yes. Bravo. And to me, I think one of the things I always have, the microphone is in my left hand and my demon is in my right hand, and I have them by the throat. And I am squeezing my demon with my right hand, and the microphone is in my left hand. And the great thing about it is, like you said, if I wasn't nervous, I'd be nervous. If I wasn't nervous, I'd be afraid. It's totally natural. In fact, when a speaker gets up to speak to me, I like to see little bits of nervousness, because I know they care. They care about this thing. If I wasn't nervous, I'd be late and I'd be lousy. So the second thing is okay. So talk to me about your nerves. What is the worst thing that could happen? And therefore, what is your plan? So what is the worst thing that could happen to you?
And what is your plan?
Now tell me your plan. So I'll forget my lines. Okay, you have notes in your hand. Or a trick I used to do many years ago. I don't know whether I told you this. I
That,
used to, in the back of the room, I used to put flip charts with big hints
yeah,
on the flip charts, so I could speak for an hour. And if I needed to, I could look to the flip charts at the back wall of the room, and I'd see the clues because I didn't want to hold post-it notes in my hand or cards. But I
true,
think
true.
they're good. They're just as good as anything. You can do that if you want to. It's really good.
Yeah,
Also, having a story in your head when you make a presentation, you make a story. So if you tell your children the story of the Cinderella or the story of something from Aesop's fables or something, you'll never forget the story. The story has a line. You'll never forget it. And so once you practice, your story is in your head, then forget it. Give yourself permission to talk. Give your hands permission to talk, and talk to people as if they were your friends. Talk to people as if you're really trying to help them. Stop worrying about yourself. Start worrying about them. And if you talk like a human being with lots of examples, sure, the other thing is reveal a little bit about yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Become their friend. You know, tell me a little bit about. I remember a guy got up in front of a group of very difficult actuaries, and he was going to talk to them, and he was really nervous. And he said, "You know something, guys?" He said, "I got up this morning, and my wife says to me, 'Where are you going?' And he said, 'You know, I'm going to talk to 20 of the most intelligent people in the country. I'm going in to talk to the actuaries.' And do you know something? They are the most intelligent people in the country, but sometimes I think they couldn't make a decision to save their lives." And the place erupted in laughter. He was brave enough to have a little joke at them, and they procrastinated a lot. So he said, "Let's make some decisions today, guys. Let's make some decisions." And it was a fantastic start. So to me, there's this little bit of shares a little bit about yourself. Tell us who you are, not too much, but tell us who you are. People like to know a little bit about who's talking to them. So I talk about my wife, who says to me often, "You teach this stuff, Paul. Why don't you practice it?" You know, Boom.
Done.
And you can see, yeah, now you're closer to your audience. You can see a human being there, and it helps your nerves. It helps being yourself. Don't be a copy. Don't be a Xerox copy of somebody else. You'll always be poor. You'll always be bad. Be the brilliant, unique self that you are. Tell us about who you are. Practice, so you don't forget your great story all the way through. And don't be worried about nerves. Nerves are totally normal.
I'm so happy I hear these answers from you. I hope, Max, you're taking note of these pearls of wisdom that Paul has given us. It's true that I recently read in Adam Grant's, one of the best psychologists in the world, new book, Think Again, that imposter syndrome is a good thing. And I was happy to read about this because I'm a perfectionist. And every time I go to a presentation, if it's for kids in the kindergarten or in New York City, I always feel these nerves. But as I told one of my mentees recently, and she has found it very helpful, don't go point by point, go block by block. So block by block,
Yeah.
try to see your speech, if it's a speech, because sometimes these leaders were talking about other things, but go, since you mentioned about speeches, go block by block. And I agree with the storytelling. We do remember the story. That's what gets riveted into our heads.
Mm.
And we were brought up with once upon a time. So happy to hear that imposter syndrome will happen to us as newly appointed team leads. And I'm happy to hear about your remedies, which is common logic and common sense. But common sense is indeed not so common.
Not so common.
Yeah, it's true.
It's true. Yeah. How is your time going? Are
We're
we
going
okay?
exactly on time.
Bravo.
We'll be asking you one question, a great question that came up. But before I ask the question, let me make a short recap. As Dr. Paul Donovan has told us today, the biggest challenge facing leaders is to manage to understand the division between the work they're doing and managing other people. From leading yourself to leading others. It is very important. Also, the mentors or the managers of the manager should stay next to them, help them pull up a mirror for them to see themselves, so they can see themselves in the mirror and guide them. Paul told us that delegation is one of the major challenges facing people. And instead of going around telling people to delegate, just let it go through the grapevine in the company that people who get promoted are the ones who create other giants and not raising children all the time. So do create other giants, do create other people. I once heard a proverb that really stuck with me. First-rate people hire first-rate people, while second-rate people hire third-rate people. So we want to hire first-rate people and help them to become first-rate. And last but not least, Paul told us that imposter syndrome is there and it can be our ally as long as we learn to calm our nerves. And having nerves, maybe it's a sign of conscientiousness. So for all you team leads out there who are getting into a new position, managing your former colleagues, please listen in, listen to Paul Donovan's wise and solid advice, and please rewind this and keep it as your Bible. So Paul, I will only ask you one question coming in from our audience, and let's finish with this question. That's a great question by Antonis Potolias. Here is the question. Is the number one in a team always the best candidate to be promoted?
And no, is my immediate answer. So first of all, the skills necessary to be a great operator are not the same as the skills necessary to be a great manager. And the problem for organizations is that the only reward system for excellence we seem to have is the ladder that people climb. So I get an extra salary if I go. I'm not necessarily certain how to actually fix this, but my feeling is that you need to give people the opportunity to develop in their careers. And many excellent operators don't actually want to become the manager. They are actually terrified of becoming the manager. They would rather keep doing the beautiful work that they do. They love engaging with the customer. They love selling. They don't want to necessarily manage. They'd like more money, but sometimes we force them to go up the ladder, and sometimes it's not a good thing. My instinct is to try and look for the person who actually has the ability to empathize with people around them, is trusted. They don't have to be the absolute best player on the team, but they do have to be really competent. They can't be a turkey. You can't promote turkeys to become your managers. They have to be excellent performers. They don't have to be the absolute best. And another point is, when we make a mistake, we should allow the person to go back with dignity to being, move them into projects or move them back to their old job if possible, quick, not to humiliate them, but to do it as quickly as possible. Otherwise, we have a stressed manager and a stressed team.
Great reply. So empathy is the key word here. It's not about being the best. It's not about having the best results, but about being able to empathize with people. And once you get up there, if for any reason you cannot stay up there, they need to move that manager back into position fast. We have another user sending something in. Let me read it because it's long. Resistance comes from fear of the new and ego. I not getting acknowledged for the work I will be putting in. Team doesn't matter, it's all about me. How, as a people's manager, can you make people get over their ego? So people do have an ego. How can you help people get over their ego? It's not about me, it's about the team.
I think one of the most successful moments that you can have in your life is when your team succeeds and when you give them the credit for succeeding. People will die for a manager who always recognizes and gives them the recognition for the things they did very well. And people will hide from a manager who actually takes credit for their work. So there is no trust and no loyalty when a manager is taking credit for their work. Again, you have to produce giants, as you say. So we need managers who are prepared to produce giants. If you're in it for the recognition yourself, it's really not the place. You shouldn't be in management. It's like Mary Parker Follett said, your job is to get work done through other people. Who will work for you if you don't recognize their work? Who will work for you? Who will do great things if you take credit for everything they do? So it starts with your own ego to say, how can I make these people into giants? It's not me. It's not about me. So the old The old joke that used to go, Michael, was everybody's so selfish. Nobody wants to talk about me. And 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 that's what I really feel we should say to some of these managers. So everybody's so selfish. Nobody really wants to talk about you. You know, and we need to be tough with them to say it's about them. It's about growing them.
Very true, very true. Are you here as a manager to serve or to be served? Are you a cold manager or a driven manager? A driven manager is someone who thinks that everyone owns him or her. She owns the company, she owns the position, she owns the result. A cold manager is someone who truly understands that everything is on loan. His or her position is on loan, the current performance is on loan, his or her people are on loan. And I believe we need more cold managers who are able and willing to serve. So thank you very much, Paul, for an amazing performance. I loved it. There were lots of pearls of wisdom. We're going to record everything and write everything down. And my last message from you to our team, please feel free to let us know anything you want. Just the last message to our audience, please.
You have another question, do we?
No, it's just a hi guys and everything nowadays. It's okay. Go ahead, please.
Thanks for today's live. My question for Mr. Paul nowadays: the subordinates can't know much more. Yes, can learn faster. How does a manager cope with this trend? The very tendency here to stay. Yes, I love it. I love this one because, and this has been around for a few years. We are hiring. In Cyprus and in Greece. Most master's degree students in Europe, if not the world. So you're always going to be managing people who probably have more up-to-date education than you have. But you see, it's not the point to be the smartest boy or smartest girl in the room. That's not the point. If that's the point, you're in the wrong room. You know, you shouldn't be thinking that you have to be. In fact, if Steve Jobs can actually behave like this, why can't we? You know, Steve Jobs, why would I hire successful, smart people into my organization and then tell them what to do? You know, he always said this. He said, you have to hire the smartest people, the people who are much smarter than you, and be comfortable with the fact that they know things that you don't know. It's illogical to think that you can know everything. And relax. Relax. That's not your job. It's not your job to know that stuff. So I take my inspiration from Steve Jobs on this one. Be comfortable that you don't know the answers. It's great. In fact, I trust a person more who says, I don't know.
Very true.
Rather than someone who pretends to know the answer because they're too insecure to say so. Wow. How can you trust somebody like that?
So the person who asked this question, Stelios Ioannidis, is a very smart guy, but he's also very smart to know that he doesn't know everything. I'm so happy that he asked this question. He's a person I admire. So fair enough. He very much appreciated. Thank you, Stelios. Thank you to everyone who tuned in today. We always promise to keep it at 25 minutes, but we gave an extra 3.5 minutes because you deserve it, guys. Paul, thank you very much. My best regards to your family, to Ireland, to Aoife, your daughter, and hope we have her on the show soon as well. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Michael. Every success in the future to you and Max. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you, Max, for organizing everything. Great show. Bye-bye. Stay on the